of Western Togoland. He actually takes care of Canada and the United States. We'll be having an interview in the studios. You can watch all this live on Loud Silence Radio app by downloading our app. It's compatible on Android and also on iOS. You can also watch us live on YouTube by subscribing to our page, Loud Silence Radio and TV Network. Loud Silence Radio and TV Network on YouTube. You can also watch us live on Facebook. You can just follow us. You can follow our page, With All Due Respect, on Facebook. Now, today's editorial. So, with all due respect, the Ghanaian public is still debating the pros and cons of the introduction of the new notes. I am talking about the 100 and 200 cedi notes, which has been introduced by this current government. Today's editorial is going to throw light on this move by this NPP government led by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and his Vice President Alhaji Mahmoud Bawumia. The question is, does Ghana need a new currency at this moment? What influenced this, and how come we the citizenry were not consulted when such plan was put together by this government? It is looking more like the government of the day. I'm talking about this NPP government, which I am part of, only thinks about what pleases them. I'm going to take this again. It is looking more like the government of the day. This NPP government, which I voted for, only thinks about what pleases them, but not what pleases the citizens. With all due respect, from a purely financial perspective, large denomination bills are preferred because they are readily accepted and easily convertible. Those who argue in favor of large currency must often push this point to support their argument, which to me is ridiculous and baseless because it is becoming increasingly apparent that the social and economic ills caused by large denomination notes outweighs their advantages. Now, recently, one of the world's renowned economists, Peter Sands of the Harvard Kennedy School, has documented these disadvantages. The first was tax evasion, financial crimes, drug trafficking, and terrorism financing, which he sees as the major disadvantage to the societies and economies. Each of these disadvantages he listed can cause severe damage to a country and more severe to a third world country like ours. In his book, Peter Sands has quoted some remarkable and astonishing figures in his research in order to push the case for strict regulation or putting an end to large denomination bills. Other financial experts around the world have raised reasonable arguments in support of Sands' assertion, and most economies are working towards its realization. Now, let's take a few minutes and listen to Peter Sands when he spoke on why printing new currency every year by governments across the world, especially in Africa, is basically useless and also an opportunity for those particular governments to steal from their people.
To politicians, how countries get in debt. Let me explain, because I don't think you really understand it. It's because politicians consistently spend more money than they raise in taxation, more money than they can possibly raise in taxation, most of which, in point of fact, they actually waste. The reason we're talking about countries which are broke, and they are broke, is because their ridiculous, ineffective, ignorant politicians consistently spend more money than they can raise. And then they borrow, and they borrow, and worse, they then print money because politicians and their central banks have a machine which prints money. You do that as a private citizen, and it's a criminal offence. You would go to prison for doing that, and politicians and their central banks do it all the time. Let me explain to you that these countries are broke, and they're broke because of their own stupid leadership and politicians, and it's immoral to ask ordinary taxpayers of any country to pick up the tab for failed politicians and failed banks. They are defaulted. They're broke. For God's sake, let's all of us admit it.
With all due respect, my fellow Ghanaians, according to estimates, money flowing across borders related to financial crimes amount to over $2 trillion, whilst $1 trillion of monetary flow is related to corruption. Large denomination bills from an increasing portion of these transactions. For example, around 2006, the Spanish authorities, who were investigating the increasing incidence of corruption in the real estate sector, found that €500 bill had become almost a quarter of the total money in circulation. And underpinning all this debate about large denomination bills is the close nexus between crime and hard cash. If crime of any nature is to succeed, then the anonymity of its financial transaction is critical to its survival. And in the world of crime and illegal activities, hard cash is the most sought after commodity. Now, my fellow Ghanaians, we have to understand that the first thing that robbers, terrorists, and decoys go after is hard cash. Later, they go after the valuables. With all due respect to my fellow journalists in Ghana who have been paid by this government to propagate its outmoded and dangerous decision, yes, you guys have decided to base your argument on the use of the £50 denomination bills in Britain without telling us Ghanaians the current position of these countries on the use of the large denomination bills. The €500 bill, for instance, became a favorite among criminals, money launderers, terrorists, and corrupt elements. Terrorists who committed the France attack. Yes, we all remember that. The terrorists who committed the France attack and later Belgium were found to have had substantial amount of these €500 bills. Policymakers decided to remove the €500 note from the system to choke terrorism financing, or at least make it difficult for them to access money. I will be happy if my fellow journalists in Ghana paid to propagate or defend this bad move by this government try to do a little research and find out why the United States discontinued the use of the $1,000 bill. My fellow Ghanaians, I believe we have to condemn the introduction of the new denomination bills. The reason is simple. The Vice President, Alhaji Mahmoud Bawumia, told Ghanaians that this government has done so well when it comes to money management. I would like to ask, what has happened to the paperless or cashless initiative? The President is the Commander-in-Chief and his Vice heads the Police Council and a council member of other security agencies, which puts them in the privileged position when it comes to information gathering. Is the administration aware that our borders are porous? Are they aware that Ghana has become a safe haven for criminals, including money launderers in the sub-region? I can talk about Ade and Charles, the two fraudsters who were involved in the Dam1 case. How they managed to use the influence of people like Gabi Ochredako and the CID boss Tiwa Adodankwa to commit money laundering. We all know that foreigners operate big businesses in this country, and some of these foreigners do dirty business. With all due respect, my fellow Ghanaians, the Vice President, Alhaji Mahmoud Bawumia, told us that currency notes are an inefficient means of payment, hence the introduction of the cashless system. So why the sudden U-turns? Have we become a country of U-turns? In financially developed countries, many alternative and more efficient means of payment exist. Transfer between banks, using debit cards, prepaid cards, smartphones, and etc. We should be gravitating towards these innovative systems instead of backward movements. And those using the £50 and $100 to support their baseless arguments, have they considered the strength of these currencies and their usage across the globe? Or you guys are just putting out something to satisfy your paymasters? What about the associated challenges when it comes to our local business transaction? We see trotro mates and passengers fight over change, and we see same at our business centers. Some European countries are discouraging the use of cash transaction by setting upper limits on the size of a transaction that can be made using cash. In France, for instance, it's €3,000 for fiscal residents. In Spain, it's €2,500. In Belgium, it's 5,000, and in Greece, it's €1,500. My fellow Ghanaians, we have to start thinking. We have to start thinking alongside the new world. Finally, with all due respect, this is what we have to be looking at, not this lazy thinking approach by our leaders. I pray those journalists paid to propagate this outmoded concept do extensive research to know more about the cashless system, its advantages, and the dangers associated with the use of higher denomination bills. My fellow Ghanaians, until we start to speak truth to these politicians, especially this particular government, which I belong to, we will never get to where we are going to. Today, this NPP government only thinks about tomorrow's elections and how they can lie to the people today. They make promises which they know they will never be able to fulfill. We must hold these people accountable and also ask them questions and demand reasonable answers. My fellow Ghanaians, we have to start speaking truth to power. This new currencies put in the system is going to further deteriorate our economy. My fellow Ghanaians, we have to be honest with each other, speak truth to power. Changing the currency, printing new currencies cannot make our economy better. We have to speak truth. And when we speak truth, we have to ask questions and demand reasonable answers. We have to understand that the conversation does not end here. On Tuesday, I'll be speaking to experts, people who have knowledge about the effect of the introduction of these new